She was stirring sugar into her coffee like nothing had happened, like the walls of our life weren't collapsing around us. The morning light was pouring through the window, hitting her hair just right, and all I could think was how cruel it was that someone who looked so angelic could burn me alive with a single sentence. "You'll get over it," she said, almost bored, like she was talking about a scraped knee or a broken phone screen. I just sat there, my jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth might crack. My hands were trembling on the table, and all I could hear was the faint clinking of her spoon against the mug. No apology, no guilt, nothing. Just that cold, empty sentence that landed like a sledgehammer on my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam my fist into the table and demand she take it back. But all I did was stare at her, my throat burning. How do you even argue with someone who's already left you emotionally? She was right in front of me, and yet I'd never felt so invisible in my life. I pushed back my chair so hard it scraped against the floor, but she didn't even flinch. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, nothing else. I didn't say a word. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me beg or cry. I just got up and walked out the door, leaving behind every memory, every photo on the wall, every piece of myself I'd poured into that house. The air outside felt heavier than the kitchen I'd just left. I stood in the driveway, staring at my car like it might give me answers. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second. As I drove, my mind kept replaying the last 2 weeks. The late-night phone calls she'd step outside to take, the girls' nights that ended at 3 a.m., the smell of cologne that didn't belong to me. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about last night. She'd been gone for a long time. I was just too much of a coward to see it. Now I'm parked in some abandoned lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it's the only thing keeping me upright. The silence in the car is suffocating, and my mind is spinning out of control. I don't know what hurts more, what she did, or how little she seems to care. I sat there in the car for almost an hour, gripping the steering wheel as though it could somehow hold my crumbling world together. The sky was still dark, and the hum of the streetlights was the only sound I could hear. My thoughts were a chaotic storm. Every memory of Clara, every laugh, every small detail of our life together felt like it was being torn apart and thrown back at me. I couldn't stop hearing her voice, that flat, dismissive tone. "You'll get over it." As if I was just some temporary inconvenience in her story. Eventually, I drove back. I didn't want to, but part of me couldn't leave without answers. The house looked different as I pulled up, almost like a stranger's home. I walked in quietly, and the smell of her coffee still lingered, but it felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone else's life. Clara was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, legs curled up on the couch. She didn't even look up when I came in. "Why?" I finally asked. My voice cracked. "Why him? Why now? Do you even care that I'm standing here, bleeding on the inside?" She sighed, like I was a child asking too many questions. "Roland, you always make everything so dramatic. I don't love you like I used to, okay? I didn't plan this, but I'm happy when I'm with him. You'll survive. You always do." Her words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Happy when she's with him? I wanted to ask who he was, where she met him, how long this betrayal had been brewing, but every question felt pointless. It was like shouting into a void. She had already checked out, and I was the idiot still holding on to something that didn't exist anymore. I sat on the edge of the coffee table, staring at her, trying to remember the last time she looked at me like I mattered. I couldn't. All I could see now was a stranger wearing her face, someone I no longer recognized. She didn't even have the decency to pretend she cared. It was all just gone. Something in me broke right then, but not in the way I expected. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just stood up and looked around the house one last time, every photo on the walls mocking me, every memory turning bitter. "You know what, Clara?" I said quietly. "You're right. I'll get over it. But you'll have to live with the fact that you burned this all down." I walked out again, this time with no hesitation, no second guessing. My hands were shaking as I started the car, but there was a strange clarity settling in, like the moment after a storm when you know the wreckage is still there, but at least you can see it clearly. I didn't sleep that night. I drove aimlessly until the sun came up, my thoughts running in circles like wild dogs. When I finally stopped at a roadside diner just outside town, I ordered a coffee I didn't drink and stared at the condensation on the window. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my mind kept replaying her words, like some cruel mantra. You'll get over it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had been living in a fog for months, pretending not to see the signs because I didn't want to face the truth. But now, with everything out in the open, a strange hunger for answers took over. I needed to know who he was, how long this had been going on, and why I'd been the last one to see it. When I finally gathered the courage to go back home, the house was silent. Clara's car was gone, but her phone charger was still plugged in by the bed. That's when I saw it. Her tablet, lying on the nightstand, unlocked. It was like the universe was daring me to look. I told myself I shouldn't, that I didn't want to be that guy, but my hands moved on their own. The first thing I opened was her messages. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe some casual flirting, some lame excuse I could wrap my mind around. But what I saw turned my stomach. There were dozens of texts, all from a name I didn't recognize. Eli. The way she talked to him wasn't just affectionate, it was worshipful. She called him the only one who makes her feel alive, told him how she'd laugh at me behind my back, how she couldn't wait until I was out of the way. Out of the way. Those words burned into me like acid. One message, dated just 2 days ago, made me freeze. I think he suspects something. He's been watching me more lately. Don't worry, I'll handle it if it gets messy. Handle it if it gets messy. My heart pounded as I read it over and over. What did she mean by handle it? I dropped the tablet on the bed, my mind spinning. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't just her being happy with someone else. There was something darker brewing here, and I felt like I'd just stumbled onto the first page of a book I wasn't supposed to read. I don't know why, but instead of confronting her again, I sat down at my desk and started writing everything I remembered from the last few months. Dates, places, weird excuses she'd made. I wanted to see if I could find a pattern. The more I wrote, the more I realized how many pieces of the puzzle I'd ignored. The nights she came home with wet hair, but swore she hadn't been to the gym. The random business trips that never lined up with her work schedule. The sudden interest in new perfumes and lingerie I'd never seen her wear around me. By the time she came home that evening, I was sitting in the dark, waiting. She walked in, saw me there, and froze. "Roland," she said cautiously, "what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a stranger standing in my house. "I read your messages," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I know about Eli." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Anger? I couldn't tell. But then she smirked, like I was a child who had just found out the truth about Santa Claus. "So what now? Are you going to cry? You'll get over it, Roland. You always do." But this time, I felt something different stirring inside me. I wasn't sure if I'd ever get over this, but I was damn sure I wasn't done digging. I didn't answer her that night. I didn't scream, didn't demand explanations. There was no point. I just stared at her until she looked away, and that small victory felt like the only power I had left. But when she went upstairs to shower, I sat in my car again, parked in the driveway like some pathetic guard dog who'd been abandoned. My thoughts were racing too fast to sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about that name, Eli. Who the hell was he? How deep did this go? By midnight, I was scrolling through everything I could find on her tablet again. The messages weren't just about romance. They had this strange undertone, like they were planning something. There was a text where she said, "He's too predictable, Eli. He never questions anything." I almost feel bad for him. Almost feel bad. Almost. I wanted to throw the tablet against the wall, but instead, I copied every single message onto my own phone. I didn't trust her, but more importantly, I didn't trust myself not to lose my mind without proof. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I spent the day digging through anything I could, her social media, her emails, even receipts she had stuffed into drawers. That's when I found something that made my blood run cold. A hotel receipt from a place 2 towns over, dated just 3 days ago. I stared at it, my hands shaking, and I could see her lies stacking up like a tower ready to collapse. I drove to that hotel. I don't even know what I expected to find. Maybe his name in the guest book. Maybe some sign that this was real and not some nightmare I'd made up. I walked up to the front desk, showed them the receipt, and asked if Eli had checked in with her. The receptionist gave me this uncomfortable look and said, "Sir, I can't give out guest information." I must have looked desperate because she hesitated and added, "But I can tell you this. Your wife wasn't alone." I walked out of there with my chest tight and my vision blurring. My worst fears were no longer just suspicions. They were real, tangible, standing in front of me like a monster I couldn't fight. That night, I didn't go home. I parked outside a 24-hour diner, staring at my phone, scrolling through her messages with Eli again and again. And then I saw something I'd missed before, a message from him saying, "We need to be careful. He's starting to notice. Maybe it's time we just tell him everything." Tell me everything? What was there to tell that I hadn't already seen? Unless there was something worse. Something I hadn't even begun to imagine. I knew then that I couldn't just sit and wait for the truth to fall into my lap. If she wasn't going to tell me who Eli was, I was going to find out myself. The next morning, I woke up in the driver's seat of my car with a stiff neck and a pounding headache. I'd barely slept an hour, but there was no time for rest. Something inside me had shifted, an ugly mixture of anger and obsession. I didn't just want to know who Eli was anymore. I needed to know. I needed to see his face, hear his voice, understand why my wife looked at him with words like, "the only one who makes her feel alive," while I sat at home clueless. I drove back home early, parking a few streets away. I didn't want Clara to know I was watching. When she left for work, I followed her. I felt ridiculous, like some amateur detective from a bad movie, but I couldn't stop. Every movement she made, every call she took, I watched from a distance. At first, everything looked normal. She went to her office, grabbed coffee, sat at her desk. But around lunchtime, things got strange. She walked out of the building with her phone pressed to her ear, looking over her shoulder like she was checking if someone was watching. Then she got into her car and drove off, not to a cafe or a restaurant, but to the edge of town, an area with old warehouses and barely any traffic. I parked far enough away to stay unseen and watched her car pull up next to a black SUV. A man stepped out. I couldn't see his face clearly from where I was, but I could tell immediately that this wasn't some casual meeting. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years, that wide, reckless smile that used to be just for me. He leaned in close, and I felt something inside me collapse. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They stood there talking for a while, but it didn't look like just talking. He touched her arm. She laughed. Then they both got into his SUV and drove away together, leaving her car behind. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. 20. My chest was tight, my mind spinning out of control. Where the hell were they going? I almost drove off to follow them, but something stopped me. Instead, I got out and walked over to Claire's car. The door was locked, but the window was slightly open, and inside, I could see her purse on the passenger seat. I don't know what possessed me, but I reached in, pulled the lock, and opened the door. Inside, I found something I wasn't expecting, a second phone. It was a cheap burner phone, the kind people buy when they don't want to be traced. My heart was pounding as I scrolled through it. There were only 2 numbers saved. One was labeled Eli. The other was just a string of digits. No name, no clue who it belonged to. The most recent message from the unnamed number read, "Be careful. Don't let him catch you off guard." I shoved the phone into my jacket pocket and left, my mind reeling. What was going on? Who was this other number? Was I just the clueless husband caught in some sick game I didn't understand? I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I sat in my car outside that warehouse district until long after dark, hoping I'd see them again. When they finally came back, Clara looking flushed, Eli looking smug, I didn't move. I didn't confront them. I just watched as she got into her car and drove home, like nothing had happened. I stayed there, staring at the black SUV long after it left. Something about it bothered me. No plates on the front. Tinted windows. Like whoever owned it didn't want to be seen. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with an affair. Something else was happening. Something bigger. Something I wasn't supposed to see. And for the first time, I wondered if "you'll get over it" wasn't just her way of dismissing me. It was her warning. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after seeing them together. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Clara laughing, her hand brushing against Eli's arm, her body language screaming a kind of freedom I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It felt like she'd stepped into an entirely different life, one where I didn't exist. That black SUV haunted me. The way it rolled in with tinted windows and no front plates. It wasn't just suspicious, it was deliberate. I knew I had to find him. The next day, I went back to that warehouse district, but not during the day. I waited until the late evening, when the streets were quiet and the only sounds were the distant hum of trucks on the highway. I parked 2 blocks away from where I'd seen the SUV, my heart pounding so loud I was afraid someone could hear it. I walked along the row of abandoned buildings, their rusted metal siding groaning in the wind. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down I knew I wasn't. Something about Eli didn't feel like a simple affair. As I circled around one of the warehouses, I spotted it, the black SUV parked half-hidden behind a chain-link fence. The driver's side window was cracked open slightly. I pulled my hoodie up, stepped closer, and peeked inside. The interior was spotless, almost unnaturally clean, like it had just been detailed. There was a phone mount on the dashboard and a single leather glove lying on the passenger seat. No registration papers, nothing personal, nothing that screamed, "This belongs to someone with a normal life." I heard footsteps then, and I froze. A man rounded the corner, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. Even from a distance, I knew it was him. The way he carried himself, confident but calculating, sent chills down my spine. He stopped when he saw me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. "You lost?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge, like he was testing me. I swallowed hard. "Just looking for someone," I said, trying to sound casual. "You Eli?" The corner of his mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile, but decided against it. "Depends who's asking." I felt my chest tighten. Every instinct told me to walk away, but I couldn't. "I'm Clara's husband," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, until I could see the faint scar running along his jawline. His eyes were dark and unreadable, like he was trying to measure exactly how much I knew. "You should go home," he said softly. Not as a suggestion, but as a warning. "This isn't something you want to be part of." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What the hell are you doing with my wife?" For a long moment, he just stared at me, and I swear I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pity, maybe even regret. Then he turned, walked back to his SUV, and without another word, drove off into the night. I stood there shaking, my mind screaming with questions I couldn't answer. I went back to my car, my hands still trembling. Everything about this felt wrong. It wasn't just an affair. Eli wasn't just some random guy who'd stolen my wife's heart. There was something dangerous here, something I didn't understand yet. And Clara, did she know what she was getting into? Or was she part of something even darker? I drove home, but the house didn't feel like home anymore. Clara was there, sitting on the couch, watching TV as if nothing had happened. She looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Where have you been?" I stared at her, wondering how she could sit there so calmly when I felt like my entire life was about to implode. I didn't answer. I just walked past her and went upstairs, my mind buzzing with one thought. I had to find out who Eli really was and what he wanted with her. The next morning, I woke up with this gnawing sense that time was running out, though I had no idea what for. Clara was in the kitchen making toast like nothing in the world was wrong, humming some tune that grated against every nerve in my body. I watched her for a moment from the hallway, wondering how someone could look so normal while living a double life. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, but I kept quiet. If I pushed too hard, she'd just shut down, or worse, disappear. I needed to be smarter than that. So I played the role of the clueless husband, kissed her on the cheek before she left for work, and then I waited until she drove off. I didn't follow her this time. I had a better plan. I still had her burner phone, the one I'd found in her car. I'd been hesitant to mess with it, afraid she'd notice it missing, but now I didn't care. I went through every contact, every text, every call log. Most of it was messages to Eli, but there were a few calls to that second number, the one with no name. And that number, I realized, was local. I dialed it with my own phone, holding my breath. It rang twice before a man's voice answered, sharp and impatient. "Clara," he said. I froze for a second, then hung up without saying a word. My heart was pounding. Who was that? It wasn't Eli's voice. This was someone else. Another player in whatever game they were running. I stared at the phone, every nerve in my body screaming that I was getting closer to something I wasn't supposed to find. The rest of the day was a blur. I drove aimlessly, my mind replaying every interaction I'd had with Clara over the last few months. Every moment that didn't add up. I started remembering small details, like how she'd started locking the mail drawer, or how she'd get this strange look when the news played stories about financial crimes. It made no sense, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just about cheating. By evening, I found myself parked outside her workplace. I told myself I was just there to clear my head, but then I saw it. Her car pulling out of the lot, with Eli's SUV sliding right in behind her like they'd planned it. Without thinking, I followed. They drove across town to a small, nondescript building tucked behind a gas station. It didn't look like a restaurant or a store. There were no signs, no windows. Just a single steel door and a flickering light above it. They both got out and went inside. I waited 5 minutes, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and then I followed. The door was unlocked. I slipped inside, and immediately I was hit by the smell of chemicals and something metallic, like old coins or blood. The place was dimly lit, just a few hanging bulbs casting harsh shadows on the walls. It wasn't an office. It looked like some kind of makeshift workshop. Tables with tools, boxes with labels I couldn't read, papers scattered everywhere. I heard voices down the hall, Clara and Eli, talking in low, urgent tones. I crept closer, staying in the shadows, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. "He doesn't suspect how deep this goes," Eli was saying. "As long as we keep him thinking this is just about us, he won't dig any further." Clara laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. "He's too naive. He won't see it coming." I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my ears. See what coming? What were they talking about? I felt like I was in some twisted movie, eavesdropping on villains plotting their next move. I wanted to burst in there, scream at her, demand to know what the hell she was doing, but I didn't. I ran. I don't even remember how I got back to my car, but I did. I sat there shaking, staring at the building as if it would give me answers. All I knew was that this wasn't just betrayal. It was something much darker, and I was tangled in it without even knowing how. I sat in that car for nearly an hour, my hands trembling, my mind spinning like a broken record. The fear, the betrayal, the confusion, it was all pressing down on me like I was drowning. But then, something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. For the first time in weeks, I could see everything for what it really was. Clara and Eli's web of lies was theirs, not mine. I didn't need to understand their schemes or their secrets. I didn't need to dig any deeper into the darkness they were building. I just needed to get out before it consumed me too. I went home, not to confront her, but to reclaim my life. She was there when I walked in, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like always. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a long moment, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like I was finally seeing her for who she truly was, a person I didn't recognize anymore. "I'm leaving," I said simply. My voice didn't shake this time. She looked up, blinking, clearly not expecting that. "What are you talking about?" "I'm done, Clara. Whatever this thing is with Eli, whatever secrets you're keeping, it's not my fight. I won't let you make me the weak, clueless husband anymore. I deserve better than this." For a moment, her expression softened, like she was about to say something, but then she just nodded. No apology, no fight. That told me everything I needed to know. I grabbed my bag, already packed with the essentials, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. In the days that followed, something incredible happened. The world didn't fall apart like I thought it would. I found a small apartment, got back into my old hobbies, and started talking to friends I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't easy. Some nights I'd still wake up feeling that old ache in my chest, but every day it got a little lighter. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. A week later, I got a call from a private investigator I'd hired in a desperate moment before all of this spiraled. He told me everything. Eli wasn't some romantic rival. He was part of a shady business deal Clara had been hiding, something illegal and dangerous. In the end, I realized I hadn't lost her love. I'd dodged a bullet. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't the guy sitting in his car at 3 a.m., feeling worthless. I was someone who'd walked through fire and come out alive. Sometimes I still hear her words in my head. "You'll get over it." But now, they don't hurt. She was right. I did get over it. And I built a better life because I finally got up and left.